Canada's House of Commons observed a moment of silence to mark the first anniversary of the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Now, who was Nijjar? A Canadian celebrity, a freedom fighter, a member of parliament? Well, Nijjar is a member, or rather was a member of the band Sikhs for Justice that calls for a separate state of Khalistan. What's more, he was the chief of the Khalistan Tiger Force, a terrorist organization. Now, he was gunned down by armed miscreants last year. And here you have a picture of this activist holding an AK-47 assault rifle in Canada. Now, the possession of that rifle could get you a 5-year jail sentence in Canada. Not just that, while the House of Commons was holding this 1-minute memorial service for this man, there was a large protest in front of India's consulate in Vancouver, in which posters of Talvinder Singh Parmar, who's considered the mastermind of the bombing of Air India Flight 182, the Kanishka, were displayed. Now, the Kanishka bombing is one of the worst incidents of terrorism in the world. 329 civilians, including 86 children, were killed. This incident is observed in Canada as the National Day of Remembrance for the victims of terrorism. Let me say this in a different way. The Canadians were celebrating the killing of innocent Canadians by a Canadian who had placed the bomb on the plane. And they were celebrating this in front of the Indian consulate in Canada. And the Canadian Parliament was commemorating a man who's part of the violent ideology which led to the bombing of Kanishka nearly 4 decades ago. Now, while this is about the Canadians, we in India who are facing terrorism on a daily basis, Mumbai, Delhi, Jammu and Kashmir, we understand the killing of innocent people in terror attacks more than anyone else. And keeping the 39th anniversary of the Kanishka bombing on the 23rd of June in mind, we pay our homage to the victims with a 1-minute silence. Thank you. 329 lives lost by an ideology that's now being celebrated, that's being observed in Canada nearly 4 decades ago. Why does Canada indulge in doublespeak, and how does India tackle this Canadian Khalistani provocation? Joining me to discuss this are Sanjay Lazar, who lost his parents and sister in the Kanishka bombing, and of course, former ambassador to the United States, Mira Shankar. And in the studio with me, I have my colleague Deepak Bhadana, who's also been closely looking at Khalistani terrorism of the kind that we see on full display in Canada. Welcome to the News9 Plus show. Sanjay, I want to start by asking you, your story is one of grit, resilience, courage, all of this and more. In fact, I don't know of anyone who's lost their entire family like this in a terror attack. You were literally orphaned 4 decades ago. It's one of the worst terror attacks of its kind before 9/11. And then you dusted yourself, picked up the pieces, got back to work, and today you are in London on your way to Ireland to commemorate the 39th anniversary of that horrible incident which cost you your family. And at the same time, you have the Canadian Parliament standing up to observe a minute's silence for a man who's part of that same violent ideology that cost you your family. What are your thoughts on this?
Sandeep, thank you for having me on the show. Like you said, I've just landed at Heathrow and I'm in London on my way en route to Ireland to commemorate the memorial ceremony and speak at the Cork County Council's meeting. It is shocking. First of all, it's, for a nation like Canada who went all out to, build memorials and try, and after they messed it up for the first 5 years, they didn't prosecute the killers. They let them get away. After the John Major inquiry, just then see as I was taking off from Delhi this early last night, I saw visuals of people protesting outside the Vancouver embassy, raising flags of Khalistan. I also now landed to the news that the Canadian Parliament has, observed a moment's silence for Hardeep Nijjar, who is a Khalistani terrorist and nothing more. And that too, few days before the anniversary of the bombing of Air India 182. How much more hypocritical can a nation get? I mean, it's like another dagger in our heart. Yes, I lost my entire family, along with the 328 others. It's 329 in Ireland and 2 in Tokyo who died on that day. So let's not forget them. This is the height of insensitiveness. It is the height of hypocrisy. It is, it's just a degenerative action, and I'm shattered to even, which is why when your people contact, I said I need to get out there and speak. It's time the Indian government. We've been raising our voices enough, but I think we need to raise it louder. We need to let the world know these people are despicable terrorists. We've been hiding. We need to build a memorial in India. We need to participate and show. I just read the Indian ambassador's statement in Canada that they will now hold a memorial. We've been, families have been holding memorials for 38, 39 years. Yes. This is the 39th year. I have been going consistently to Ireland. I know, fellow family members in Canada have done it across. It's time we do it and make, people realize that there were 86 children. My yes. baby sister was one of them on yes. it. And, it's, I can't even put it into words. I'm really stunned.
And thank you for joining us, Sanjay, and sharing your thoughts with us on this very despicable series of events that seems to be playing out in Canada. Ambassador Shankar, why can't countries like Canada seem to learn from history? Hillary Clinton had that very famous line when she went to Pakistan, where she said that those who rear snakes in their backyard sooner or later get bitten by those snakes themselves. Why is Canada refusing to learn from history? And I'm going back to 1982 when the government of India made the similar plea. In the case of Nijjar, they said, look, we have this Khalistani terrorist who's wanted and they did nothing about it. And this man goes on to bomb the Air India 182. Why is Canada refusing to learn from history? Is it vote bank politics at play over here? What are your thoughts on this?
I think initially when the Kanishka bombing took place, the West was less than sympathetic to yes. India. And if you look at the Commission of Inquiry reports in Canada, it is amazing and shocking yes. that intelligence information conveyed to a number of Canadian intelligence agencies, including by RNAW, including from their own wiretaps and other sources, that there was likely to be a terrorist bombing of an Air India plane, yes. were ignored, absolutely just ignored. Right. Then there was the destruction of evidence, actually, a large yes. number of wiretaps, which indicated or gave evidence of people talking about such a potential terrorist act, were destroyed in that process.
Right.
And then the laxness in prosecution, which allowed Talvinder Singh Parmar
Yes.
to go away from Canada, and two others. Only one person was ever convicted.
Right.
Inderjeet Singh Riyad was the only person convicted, and initially for manslaughter,
Yes.
for a terrorist incident, of this magnitude. And actually, the Canadians are, commemorating the death of Nijjar, of
Yes.
one person. But the maximum number of persons who died in this bombing were Canadian citizens.
Yes.
Over 250 Canadian citizens lost their lives in this terrorist bombing. Are their lives less important? It is actually inexplicable, but that was the attitude of the West at that time.
Yes.
Less than sympathetic to India and willing to ignore information which might have saved the day. Subsequently, and today, I think it is domestic politics.
Yes.
Because Prime Minister Trudeau is dependent on, it's a coalition, he's dependent on a party which has a large amount of Sikh support. But I think the mistake that is being made in Canada is that there are an overwhelming majority of moderate Sikhs.
Yes.
There are an overwhelming majority of non-Sikhs in Canada.
Yes.
Who would not like to see their community associated only with terrorism, drugs, or violence.
Yes.
They want to get on with their lives. They want to lead normal lives. They are hardworking. They're entrepreneurial. They're very good farmers. They
Yes.
made a success of farming. And to ignore the larger community
Yes.
because of the political clout of some organized extremist groups,
Right.
I think is wrong politics also. In the long run, it doesn't benefit anyone.
In the long run, it doesn't benefit anyone. But as you perfectly put it, Ambassador Shankar, vote bank politics has extremely short and very self-serving goals in mind. And in fact, I was looking at this book by Terry Milewski, who's been on our program often. And this excerpt actually explains this whole thing, Deepak. And this excerpt says that, Terry Milewski says, he writes, and I quote, "It's a question that's often asked by Indians. Why do Canadian politicians pander to Sikh extremists? The short answer is that it's not easy to look out at a throng of 100,000 people on Vaisakhi Day, knowing they might vote for you if you keep your mouth shut, and then than to open it and risk losing the votes," he writes, Milewski. This is a beautiful illustration of the kind of vote bank politics at play here. But Deepak, Justin Trudeau has been doing it for several months now. Standing up for this, the Khalistan radicals, who, as Ambassador Shankar mentioned, are in a minority. But they're a very vocal and a very voluble minority within Canada.
So, as Ambassador Shankar has already pointed out, she's pointed out to two elements.
Yes.
A, that there is vote bank politics involved. B, that somehow, the government manages to turn their eyes away from it. But there's also another element, which in fact was pointed out by Mr. Milewski.
Yes.
What he says is that the vast majority of Canadians today are simply unaware of what happened.
Yes.
So when they heard about Nijjar being killed over there was obviously outrage about a Canadian being killed on Canadian soil. But when these people are apprised of the fact that this man was allied to an ideology,
yes,
that was
and he's a wanted terrorist.
Yeah. At that point, Mr. Milewski cites a poll which says that most Canadians in that way are actually, they're just fine with it. They're like, he got what he deserved.
Right.
Now, I'm not condoning what happened to Mr. Nijjar, but
Yes.
it definitely shows the fact that the vast majority of Canadians do not support this.
Yes.
And it is this ignorance that Mr. Trudeau manages to take advantage of.
Yeah, absolutely. The Indian High Commission has been very quick on the uptake. They have pointed out the fact that you have the 39th anniversary of the Kanishka bombing on Sunday, a few days from today, and they've asked people to gather in large numbers. I'm also aware of the fact that there have been violent threats against Indian diplomats overseas from these very same elements that are being celebrated and harbored in Canada and in the UK and elsewhere. What is it that the Indian government can do in a situation like this, Ambassador Shankar, when your diplomats themselves are under threat and you're operating in such, an area where extremists in the name of freedom of speech and expression have, full license to do whatever they want to in public?
Well, firstly, I think we need to step up security for our missions and
Yes.
our diplomats. So that would be very important. And to strengthen security procedures that are followed for entry into the diplomatic missions. I think that is really crucial. The second would be to keep pressure on the host government.
Yes.
Because it is the responsibility and duty of the host governments to ensure that diplomatic missions are safe and are not subjected to threat of violence or threat of intimidation in their functioning. So it's important to keep the diplomatic pressure up with the Canadian government, with the government in the United States, with the government in the UK, and elsewhere, wherever we find that such things are happening, that it is the obligation of the host government to provide security and ensure security for diplomatic missions. Now, that should be as an add-on to whatever we do ourselves also to strengthen security for our diplomats and the mission. The third is to work with the justice systems of those countries, provide evidence where we are seeking extradition, provide specific evidence, because sometimes the complaint is that the allegations made by the Indian government are very wide and
Yes.
there's no corroborative evidence.
Right.
And they may not, whatever they are wanted for, may not qualify as a crime under Canadian law. So I think there's also need to change the laws. For instance, incitement to violence in India should not be so easily permitted.
Yes.
Funding of violence in India should be illegal. All these things, I think the Canadian government needs to take a harder look at their legal framework
Yes.
to see where strengthening is required. And from the Indian side, I think we need to keep the pressure up and we need to educate the public in these countries about our concerns. I think all these things together would be required, and it won't be a one-day effort.
Yes.
It has to be a long-term, persistent
Right.
and patient effort.
Absolutely. It has to be a long-term, persistent and patient effort. And who knows more about patience than Sanjay? Sanjay, you've lived through this nightmare for 39 years. What would you say to all those people protesting outside Indian missions, for something like the killing of a Khalistani activist involved in all kinds of shady deeds, but they seem to have completely omitted the fact that one of the worst, in fact, it is the worst terror incident in Canada's history, where over 200 Canadians died in the Kanishka bombing, and nobody seems to be overtly worried about that. What would you tell all those people protesting outside Indian missions in Canada today?
Sandeep, first of all, it is still the worst aviation bombing in the history of aviation. Because remember, 9/11 was not a bombing.
Yes.
9/11 was people. So this is still the worst bomb incident of
Yes.
any set of aircrafts in the world. Number two, you had asked me a question when I got cut off. The Indian government needs to come out of the diplomatic niceties, in my view.
Yes.
We have not, I'm saying something controversial. I'm going back over the last 39 years as a family member. I was 17 years old then, and I have met umpteen PMs, umpteen ministers, umpteen bureaucrats, asking them, A, to put up a memorial in India, B, to be more vocal about this so that we bring to justice
Yes.
the perpetrators. I've written in my first book, I'm writing in my second book, I'm interviewing so many of these people. We have been shy, mistaking these Khalistani terrorists
Yes.
to be the good-natured Sikhs of our nation.
Right.
The Sikh religion is such a beautiful religion. these people, these radicals are somebody else totally.
Yes.
Because we were always soft peddling this in India, you have not seen a single, overtly overt action or supportive action on the part of any government. Believe me, I say any government. Perhaps this current government is the closest thing that we've come to, tackling it left, right, and center.
Yes.
We need full frontal openness. We need to talk about this. The only way you're going to put this in the minds of all the Canadians who are youngsters who don't know about it is when you start talking about it yourself. If Canada doesn't talk about it and India doesn't talk about it, who talks about it? Right. So that's the first thing. I want people to make documentaries. I want people to make, like you all have done last year, brilliantly so. And I want people to talk, not because it's about me or my family, but we must not forget 86 kids. We must, whether they are Canadians or Indians, it doesn't matter.
Yes.
We must not forget that, a group of humans plotted this on another group of humans on an aircraft in foreign waters. And it was shocking when you, like the ambassador had rightly said, if you watch, the destruction of tape evidence and the recordings and stuff like that, it's like a spy versus spy movie.
Yes.
So we need to do that. And what will I say to those protesting outside the Indian embassy? I'd say wake up and look around you. You're sitting in a country thousands of miles away. If you think you can impact my nation with ridiculous fundamentalist ideologies, you're far from mistaken. India is stronger. The ideology of India is far stronger and far greater. I mean, I'm a living example. There are so many more like me who lost their entire families, in the Kanishka tragedy and in so many other terrorist tragedies. We need to demand. I have interviewed some of the bureaucrats, the first secretary, the second secretary who were in Canada at that time. They were getting attacked in the embassies. They were getting attacked, in their homes, some of them. So why, if the government of Canada did not provide protection and security to our diplomats 38 years ago and today, something seriously wrong with, and yet they jump up, to target the alleged killers of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who was a terrorist himself.
Yes,
please,
absolutely.
I do not condone any violence at any point.
Right.
I do not condone the violence against Nijjar himself. But I fault us in our, perfection of diplomacy that we haven't made our voice heard enough in the world.
Yes.
Do you hear the America stop talking about 9/11? No. Do you hear the Japanese not, making silent symbolic, expressions over the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki? I'm not comparing this with that, but let's recognize that a band of terrorists did this to our people. Whether they did it in Pulwama, whether they did it in the Kanishka, whether they did it in Bombay on 26/11, we need to recognize this.
Absolutely.
We can't be so inwardly.
We can't stay silent. And Sanjay Lazar, of course, someone who's been a champion of all the families of the victims, the 329 civilian lives that were lost in that absolutely brazen attack of terror almost 4 decades ago. But thanks for joining us this evening, Sanjay, Ambassador Shankar, my colleague Deepak Bhadana, while we're tracking this double standards that Canada has been adopting while sheltering the same terrorists, the same ideology that led to one of the worst terror attacks in the world nearly 4 decades ago. You can watch Sanjay Lazar in our documentary on the bombing of AI 182. Will Canada let it happen again? Only on the News9 Plus app.
This was intended to be a terrorist spectacular without precedent.
The plan was to bomb 2 Air India passenger aircrafts simultaneously.
There was a loud explosion and the whole plane just vanished.
The police dropped the ball, the intelligence officers dropped the ball, and the politicians dropped the ball.
It was a conspiracy that destroyed my life. It destroyed 331 lives.
The British Army has put an order for cap badges for its soldiers on hold. The reason, it fears, China could install bugs in these caps to track its soldiers. Now, a cap badge is a little bigger than a 5 rupee coin. This might sound straight out of Mission Impossible, but this seems to be a fact. And I have with me here in the studio today Lieutenant Colonel Rajan Pavitran, cybersecurity expert and former member of India's Military Intelligence Corps, to explain more. Colonel Pavitran, cap badges with bugs in them, are the British paranoid or is this reality?
Okay, so there is no evidence that there are bugs in them. But if the British are being paranoid, we need to take note because they are definitely technologically ahead of India.
Right.
And if they are sensing a danger, we need to pause and think, why are they acting in that manner? Is it real paranoia or is there, but if you look at IoT,
right,
miniaturization,
yes,
5G, I don't think these are, idle fears. And there is a reason for that. China has become a manufacturing superpower.
Yes.
Okay. They started creating products.
Right.
And they have now started, competing with the West on intelligence, especially technical intelligence gathering. They also have a new law. They've put out 2 sets of laws where all Chinese citizens and all Chinese industries have to cooperate with the CCP for protecting Chinese national security interests. And I think the British are merely taking note and they're being very careful.
As a lot of other Western countries are, because there have been reports recently of the US, of course, has cracked down on TikTok, which is one of the most popular social media apps anywhere in the world. There are a number of Western European nations which are keeping Chinese hardware out of their system. I recall this debate in India, Colonel Pavitran, about 15 years back when the National Security Advisor pointed out the dangers of embedding Chinese hardware in our ICT networks. Is that still a worry, or have we completely managed to remove foreign influences out of our ICT hardware?
So I notice you have carefully, said that it is not China, foreign.
Yes.
Okay, because what are our national interests? Is China our only danger? What about the West? What about other nations? Can they be dangerous to us? When I joined the army, and the Indian Constitution says we protect the nation against all threats.
Right. So firstly, you explain, Colonel Pavitran, sorry to interrupt you, but explain what ICT hardware is.
So ICT is information communication technologies. Presently, we are in the information age.
Right.
So what is this information age all about? It is of network technologies changing and giving intelligence to everything, And this is revolutionized the world. And they say there's going to be a 4th industrial revolution.
Yes.
What is this 4th industrial revolution? What is AI? These are things which we need to get into much deeper. Because the world, as we, industrial era, the whole society transformed.
Yes.
Now in the information age with AI, big data, data being the new oil, 5G, etc., going to come in, it is going to transform things beyond our imagination. Right. And the beauty is it is going to be at a much faster pace than what we imagined. So the British are being cautious. Like you said, our National Security Advisor foresaw.
Yes.
Now in one single word, no. We have done nothing. We have gone to accelerated, into absorbing those technologies. And in spite of the Prime Minister, saying, I think 2-3 years back, where he cautioned the nation on threats coming from cyberspace,
yes,
we seem to have done no action. In fact, our DPDP Act, I doubt whether we have been, it has been created to protect Indian national security. This, that act seemingly is to protect business interests of, corporates.
Explain to us why the DPDP Act does not protect Indian consumers and why it seems to cater to corporate interests, as you said.
So people have written about cyber sovereignty.
Yes.
And one of the central concepts of cyber sovereignty is the data needs to be localized. Okay. So if you allow the data to go beyond your shores into foreign shores,
yes,
and in an interconnected world, how can your laws apply? So that is the first thing.
So data localization is a very important.
It's a very, very important, topic.
So for the uninitiated, data localization is when you store all the data that's generated from the devices that you own. You store that data locally within the country, and it does not reside on a foreign server somewhere.
So it is not as simple as that. If you look at data, there is a huge sort of network. Okay, from when you say that when you study computers and interconnected this, you say there are different layers of appliances, computers. There is software, the hardware, the whole gamut. So today there are only two cyber powers, okay, in the world, which is China and US.
Right.
Okay. So there is an interesting report called Cyber Power Index by the Belfer Kennedy Center.
Yes.
They take it out, and they clearly show India belongs, although we claimed that we were a superpower, we belong to a quadrant which says we are low on capacity, and more alarmingly, we are low on intent. Low on capacity, okay, fine.
You can fix that.
You can fix it. But low on intent is a big problem. Okay.
And at the low on intent part, is it a function of us not really knowing or not caring, or the fact that there are vested interests at play?
So definitely it's not, at least 10 years back, we can say that we did not know. But in the last 10 years, a lot of us people have made people aware that this is a danger. The Prime Minister has accepted and said,
yes,
there is a danger. After that, still, if it is low on intent, it definitely has to be vested interests.
So when you said 10 years, that we know of the kind of dangers in foreign agencies snooping on people, citizens, government officials, we have Edward Snowden to thank for that.
Absolutely.
In 2013, he came out with that set of revelations which said that...
Yes. So Edward Snowden, 1,000 years hence, will be
Yes.
like Jesus Christ. Okay? He is the Jesus Christ of the information age.
Yes.
The guy who...
The Messiah who...
Yeah, the Messiah showed the world that,
Right.
this great discovery doesn't make the world flat. It's not a
Yes.
global village. And
Right.
you are going to descend into huge dangers, human race itself. Because finally, when you say that, will it finally affect the powers, those Western countries itself? Absolutely. Because surveillance is something, when that sort of power comes into hands of
Yes.
few people, human nature is such that absolute power corrupts absolutely.
So, a lot of these surveillance technologies were born out of the war on terror, the need to fight terrorism, for which you set up this massive surveillance architecture so you could monitor the movement of terrorists. But that very quickly began to be adapted for mass surveillance of people as well. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, Kanpal.
Now, this is something which I'm not sure of, because 1984, that novel,
Yes,
it preceded the global war on terror.
right.
And the author could clearly see surveillance going to take over the world.
Yes.
And if you look at the genesis of the internet, this came out of the Vietnam War, where there was no
Yes.
terror.
Right.
But it was a technology to control population by monitoring them. So I doubt whether, the war on terror was an excuse used to accelerate surveillance.
Right. But the fact is that you have entire nations today, like you mentioned so correctly, that the two superpowers, one, the only superpower and the superpower in waiting, China if you call, these are information powers as well. The United States is there, of course, and China is catching up very rapidly. They have this great firewall, the great Chinese firewall.
So when you see the narrative, we consume English media.
Yes.
We, the elite of this nation, we consume English media. We do not consume Chinese, media. We don't consume Russian media. We don't consume.
Yes.
So that's a narrative which we have, taken in. Is that the correct narrative? That Great Wall of China, or China was just protecting its interests.
Right.
But if you examine things critically, the Chinese were cautious because they, knew those imperial and colonial powers.
Yes.
If you look at the history of the Chinese people, they were always wary of the West. But our narrative was, we took on a narrative that, they benevolently gifted to us because Mahatma Gandhi, did non-violence. Chinese narrative is not that.
Right.
Chinese narrative was we had to fight for this every time.
Yes.
And they were always in opposition to the West.
Right.
If you look at the Western narrative, they always said that, China is going to be a danger.
Right.
Okay. Now, for the first time, I also noticed that Canada has said that India is going to be on equal danger at par with China.
Yes.
So maybe the narratives might start changing. Let's see.
The Western narratives, you mean, would start changing?
Yeah. Because
against
today,
India.
till date, what is the Western narrative is India is benevolent, non-aligned. But
Yes.
what is our narrative about the West? We are friends.
Right.
Most of our people aspire to go there. Our children go there. They study there. And
Yes.
it's a very benevolent
We have
sort
a lot of values that are very akin
which
to
we
the
have
West.
imbibed from them.
Yes. Which
And we
have
don't see
imbibed
them
and-
as
yes.
per se adversaries.
Yes.
But I have written this paper which I have said it is a latent power potential of India which the others see, which we have to realize. We dominate that Indian Ocean.
Yes.
We sit right in the center and we control the, if we become a naval power, if that largest nation in the world, if you start rising, if you see Western they clearly say, intent can change. It is capabilities which matter.
Capabilities which matter. But, talking about capabilities, Colonel Pavitran, what are the kind of capabilities you would like to see India develop in the coming few decades when, we are on the march towards becoming the world's third largest economy by the end of this decade, if not earlier? What are the capabilities we must put into place right now to ensure that we have a fair amount of autonomy, digital autonomy, and you're not surveilled upon by these kind of devices, and certainly not by cap badges that are manufactured by some Chinese company? What are the things that you would put into place? What are the foundational technologies that you will put into place to ensure some amount of sovereignty that we exercise on our products and our services?
Okay, see, firstly, we have to become a product nation.
Right.
We are now a services nation.
Yes.
Okay. We have to have our own products.
Hardware. We must have the
not
hardware,
only hardware,
and
the software. And we have to do all this simultaneously.
Right.
So, China did it over the last 20 years. Since we know how they did it, we have got a ready-made this, so we don't have to explore how do we find that place. We can do it if the intent is there. But I don't think the intent is there. That is frightening.
There is no intent, you're saying, to create a fairly sovereign, robust digital architecture that stands independent of the rest of the world.
So, if you look at the Belfer report of 21 and 22, Vietnam and India were in the same quadrant.
Right.
Low on capacity, low on intent. Now, 1 year later, Vietnam moved from the they remained low on capacity, but they very rapidly went to another quadrant which said high on intent.
Right.
India remained low on intent.
Right.
Okay, and that is a very extensive study.
So then define, Colonel Pavitran, for us, when you say high on intent, what are the steps that, say, you would see the government taking that would then mark us as being serious about creating data sovereignty or digital sovereignty?
Okay, so the government has declared Atmanirbhar.
Yes.
Okay, Atmanirbhar is because they have realized that if you do not own the technology, you cannot be sovereign.
Right.
But it has been restricted to within the defense, military. Okay, and who have you given this responsibility for Atmanirbhar? Secretary of Defense Protection.
Right.
The DPSU is under him.
Right.
And the DRDO. These are the people involved. Aren't they competitors to that innovation economy taking shape? Will an organization willingly sacrifice their monopolies and interests to create an innovation ecosystem? Can an innovation ecosystem happen under the GFR? So I clearly bring out, although they have said we need to do, the actions don't show that. Can you create an innovation ecosystem without a strategic venture capital fund? Which is that venture capital which will catalyze development of technologies critical
indigenous,
to us?
Innovative innovations, indigenous technologies.
Yes, because see, there are foundational technologies.
Right.
Now, you are not going to the foundation. You are only playing in layer 7 where, for example, Bill Gates, he has said, Indian innovators should build on the foundational AI which is
Western
there in micro.
AI.
So, clearly. So, in the ICT, it's also the same. Whatever innovation is on foundational things which are on the Western this. Today, we have said, China is a danger, let us now shift to West. But is that to our advantage? We've just barely 75 years back escaped from colonialism.
Absolutely.
So why do you want to go back there?
We've just escaped from colonialism and we could be heading to a new form of digital colonialism, as Colonel Pavitran mentioned. But that's all we have time for in this segment. I will continue my conversation with Colonel Pavitran on a longer interview format that you can watch on the News9 Plus app very shortly.